Good evening, everyone. We'd like to begin by acknowledging we're gathered here on Treaty 6 lands and the traditional lands of the Métis, Dakota, Lakota, and Saulteaux, and many other nations. My name is Lenore Swiston, media host of Civically Speaking, and I'm here together with my colleagues Anika Misha and Rashid Ahmad, hosts for the Voice of Saskatoon. Our shows are aired weekly on CFCR.ca, Saskatoon's community radio station 90.5 FM, on Sunday morning and Tuesday evening, respectively. With us today are our colleagues, Madhuja Ghosh, and also with regrets, Jeff Jackson, who wasn't able to be here today. And behind the scenes, we've got Ian Roche and Deborah Holbrook of knowYXE Media as well, who are part of knowYXE, of which we are broadcasting today. So Anika, over to you as we head into the weekend, an Easter Bunny weekend.
Thank you, Lenore. So we would now like to welcome our panel members. First, I would like to welcome Jason Aebig, CEO, Greater Saskatoon Chamber of Commerce. Hi, Jason.
Hi, how are you? Good to be here.
Good, how are you?
Great.
Yeah, thanks, Jason, for coming on.
You bet.
And second, we have Judith Veresuk, Executive Director, Regina Downtown Business Improvement District. Hi, Judith.
Hi, thanks for having me on tonight.
It's a pleasure. And next we have Jim Bence, President and CEO of Hospitality Saskatchewan. Hi, Jim.
Good evening. Thanks for having me.
Our pleasure. Thanks for joining us. And next we have Monica Kreuger, President, Saskatchewan Chamber of Commerce.
Nice to see all of you. Thanks for inviting me.
Perfect. And last but definitely not least, Ashley Charles, CEO, Prince Albert Regional Development Alliance. Hi, Ashley. Welcome. Perfect. So thank you so much, everyone, for taking the time out to be here with us. I know it's the start of a long weekend, but we really appreciate your time. And this forum will be conducted in 4 parts. First, we begin with a quick round of introduction by the panel members. Second, we have 2 key questions we would like each panel member to respond to lead this panel session off. And third, and most importantly, we want to open the floor to you viewing members who's joined us through Facebook and through Twitter conversation using the hashtag COVID-19SK. Everyone will be required to have a Facebook ID to join and ask questions on Facebook. And 4, we will give our panel members a minute or 2 to share any closing remarks or guidance going forward. Our role as a host will be to keep the flow of the conversation going and ask the panel members the questions we get from our audience. And please use the comment section down below to ask any questions, share any comments or concerns with our panel members. And thank you so much, panel members and audience, for joining tonight's show. It is being recorded and will be available afterwards through both the Voice of Saskatoon and Civically Speaking Facebook page. Back to you, Lenore.
Yeah, thank you so much. And yeah, what a treat to have you here. Kind of as we head into a really timely weekend that I don't think a lot of us anticipated when this all started. This COVID-19 thing, this pandemic that we're living with, you know, and the whole notion of this is our second Easter and spring break and holiday and celebration by many other cultures at this time of season. Jason, since I know you, I'm going to ask you to kick us off here by just, you know, share a little bit with people that are just tuning in right now, kind of your role and a bit about your background, if you don't mind, just in a few seconds.
Sure. You know, thank you again, both for having us tonight. It's great to be with you. You know, I'm born and raised in Saskatoon. I'm a former communications professional and a former business owner. And in October last year, I was appointed CEO of the Greater Saskatoon Chamber. So for those of you who may not be familiar with the Chamber, we are Saskatoon's voice for business, and we represent a tremendous network of community-minded businesses and organizations and leaders who want the best for their city. So that network is made up of some 1,400 member organizations and individuals from across various industries and sectors. And it makes us one of the largest member business groups in the province. So that's a little bit about me and my background and our organization.
Yeah, thank you, Jason, for coming on the show. Appreciate that. Judith, please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your organization.
Thanks, Lenore. Thanks for having me here. My name's Judith Veresuk. I'm Executive Director with the Regina Downtown Business Improvement District. I'm actually born and raised in Windsor, Ontario, and found my way over here primarily for the job. Loved the climate, so decided to stay. The Regina Downtown Business Improvement District represents all the commercial property owners within Regina's downtown. We are the primary economic driver for the city, as most of downtowns are. And as we'll kind of go through this discussion, downtowns have been heavily hit by the COVID crisis, and I'm excited to share my thoughts on that with the panel and with the audience.
Yeah, thank you so much, Judith. Jim, over to you.
Thanks again for having me tonight. My name is Jim Bence. I'm the President and CEO of Hospitality Saskatchewan. And we're Canada's newest tourism for many years, many decades. We have represented our members across Saskatchewan, I think, very well. And now that we're entering into a new era in which we have many different members across a broad range of sectors, really. So everything from hotels, motels, restaurants, event centers, anything that's considered tourism, we'll welcome into our basket and into the tent. And we're really excited about what the future may hold, although it's been extremely difficult for our industry this last year. It has really allowed some, not all, to make it to shore, but for some, this means an era in which we're going to have a whole new look at how the hospitality industry is run, how operators are able to manage their businesses, and really what's next on the horizon for Saskatchewan with regards to the visitor economy. So again, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. And I know we're going to be really interested in your comments and all of the panel's comments as we kind of go through tonight. Monica, over to you now.
Hi, I'm Monica Kreuger, and I am the current chair of the Saskatchewan Chamber. Got about another month left in my term, and I'm a past chair of the Greater Saskatoon Chamber of Commerce. So I'm a real advocate for chambers. I do believe that they are the voice of business, and especially for the small businesses that populate our province throughout, who don't have a real big voice. The chambers are the way to get the voice out there. And over the last year, we've been really collaborating with all chambers to find a way forward to support the business community, because as we know, in particular, all the small businesses are your neighbors and your friends, and their livelihoods have been really impacted. My second hat is that I am an entrepreneur, and our business, Global Infobrokers, and the Praxis School of Entrepreneurship has celebrated its 30th year. And we've assisted about 1,100 businesses to start up. So I'll be able to sort of chat about it from that perspective as well this evening.
Yeah, thank you, Monica. And you have a third hat that's called Citizen of the Year in Saskatoon. So had to sneak that one in too. So thanks so much for being part of the show. Ashley, please introduce yourself. It's great to have you.
Yes, pleasure to be here. My name's Ashley Charles, and born and raised in La Ronge, just 2.5 hours north of Prince Albert, so I didn't make it. It's just a little trek away from home. I'm the CEO of Prince Albert Regional Economic Development Alliance. First year of operations, it's been quite the ride. Our main vision is for long-term shared economic prosperity across the Prince Albert region, and we have City of Prince Albert as our founding partner, RM of Prince Albert, RM of Buckland, Muscadet First Nation, and Peter Ballantyne Development Corp. So.
Yeah, thank you, Ashley. Really great to have all of the panel members here. I'm going to start off here with the next question, and Anika, feel free to jump in if I start skipping over anyone or anything like this, but kind of as our warm-up question. And Judith, I'm going to start with you. You represent the Regina downtown, but you represent the business improvement districts as well. I know we've been on panels before talking about this over a year ago when this just started. I can't believe it's been over a year ago. What's something that's really top of mind for your organization, from your role and what you represent as we kind of navigate now through the next kind of, through the past weeks of living with this pandemic? What's kind of been top of mind for your organization?
Well, yeah, I guess what's old is new again, right? Especially in Regina, we're right back kind of where we started with shutdown of our food and beverage operators. So obviously that's definitely a challenge. what I've found is that this pandemic has really shown us how much we rely on our office economy. That has impacted downtown probably more than anything. The work from home and the public health order on top of that was just the 1-2 punch. And by no means am I endorsing folks coming back to work before it's safe or practicing unhealthy social distancing measures, I guess. But it has been extremely challenging for the folks that have made their living traditionally in the downtown, relying on those 30,000 people that used to come to their offices. They would really spur the economy downtown. You know, they're the ones buying those cinnamon buns and the coffee at the coffee shop in the morning. They're the ones going out for lunch or going out for happy hour after, doing their errands at the mall downtown on their lunch hours. So when that whole population is removed, we're really behind the 8 ball compared to our counterparts in the suburbs that really have, are struggling nonetheless. Mm-hmm. But what we're seeing, people working from home, they tend to stay in a closer, within their neighborhood. So as you know, Regina does not have a very strong residential population in its downtown. So when the office workers leave, it really is a gap that is very prominent.
Yeah, thank you so much, Judith. You know what, Jim, up to you next, because I mean you are representing a lot of the people that Judith is talking about that are employed in the downtowns across this province. So I can imagine there's a few top of minds if you want to continue with sharing what some of those thoughts might be for your sector.
All right, and Judith is very well articulated some of the challenges for our urban downtown businesses, whether they're hotels or they're restaurants. It's extremely desperate. I mean, I sometimes I'm at a loss for words and how to describe it. But across the province, the number one issue for all of us in the industry is liquidity. Is how do we manage to get from one month to the next? How do we pay those bills that are out there? And when we talk about our downtown urban centers, you know, with their fixed costs and what they have, whether you're a restaurant and you're looking to try to make your lease payment or a mortgage payment in downtown on a bigger footprint property, you know, for a large hotel, it can be anywhere up to $250,000 a month just in fixed costs. And with almost zero revenues, that makes it extremely difficult. And so those federal programs that we advocate for in the provincial I do have to say that when I speak with my colleagues from across Canada, we are in a really good position here in that our government has been extremely responsive. And with some of the programs that they have come out with and they continue to extend, this allowed many of these operators to be able to sometimes hang on by their fingernails. But we're now in a situation in which, as this runway stretches out longer and longer, it will become more and more difficult for folks to be able to hang on. If we lose our summer season across the province, that could mean, a tremendous hardship, whether you're a large, medium-sized, or small, medium-sized, or large business. In our downtown cores, if we lose our conference season, really September, October, November, where many of our bigger properties that are downtown make a good chunk of their money, that becomes very problematic as well too. So I think the role that we play, for everybody that's on this panel right now, is we have to keep an eye on what the here and now is. So in our advocacy efforts is to try to do what we can to get everybody to shore. It's like we've been thrown overboard. How can we get to shore? And then really what's on the horizon line for those employers? So, when we get to shore, for those that make it, we'll have to support each other. We'll have to dust each other off and then figure out how it is that we're going to get to that next horizon line. So there's a lot of plates spinning in the air, but one of the things I'm really encouraged by is Saskatchewan resilience and our ingenuity. We're doing extremely well, comparatively speaking to other provinces in many respects. So there's hope.
Yeah, thank you for that, and thanks for bringing hope as we go into a long weekend. That's always a good place to be. That's for sure. Monica, building on what Judith and Jim have said from their various hats, with your hat on as one with the chamber and the other, of course, with your entrepreneurship school.
Yeah, so I certainly agree with everything that Judith and Jim have said. And I think on top of that, we have to think about ourselves. And as a chamber, we're saying, take care of yourself, try to stay healthy, try to help each other stay healthy. That there's a lot of COVID fatigue. People are wanting to get out
Mhm.
there and get moving again. But we have to have some patience with each other. And that goes from the business perspective to home, and also to sort of look for the good things. Things like, we've saved a lot of money on gas this year, but then the flip side is that the providers who provide the gas aren't getting our business. So there's always a couple of sides to be looking at this. And also, I think it's been, from the chamber perspective, it's important for us to now say, what do we need to get together and prepare to be even more resilient in the future? What do we have to put in our wheelhouse and get ready for down the road? From my hat as an entrepreneur and working with entrepreneurs, I think there's opportunities amid the chaos of what we've had. And we've had lots of innovation, and we have to continue to look at what is out there, what can we do, what's new, what are the changing needs of the people that we serve, how do we do that better in this new environment that will come out the other side. And we have to stay connected. So one of the things I think a lot of the entrepreneurs I know have done is connect to people that they've never met in person. And they've went, okay, I think I just need to find this person. Let's connect via Zoom or whatever, and start to have some new relationships and to take the time to develop them. I think that it's now more than ever that we have to support each other, work in collaboration, find ways to work in different ways and in new networks to provide support coming out of the pandemic, and step out of our silos. I think those silos just have to disappear. They've disappeared during COVID. They need to stay disappeared.
Yeah, thank you, Monica, for that. Ashley, over to you with your hat on there with the Prince Albert Regional Economic Development Alliance. As you hear on this, kind of the top of mind things for you and your role and your organization.
Like I said, it was quite the rude awakening, joining during these times, but it was a challenge that was presented, and I decided to, just try and figure something out, right? So
Yeah.
It's been definitely challenging just with small businesses, like I hear across one of the biggest industries that were hit, which I manage as well, is Prince Albert tourism.
Mm-hmm.
And so the people that are heading out, pretty much Prince Albert is the gateway, to the north, right? So
Yeah.
That has definitely been hit hard just with shutting down, trying to figure out, how we're going to operate just with the COVID restrictions and the health and safety aspect of it all, and just what to expect. There's so many unknowns, and it's been definitely difficult. Again, just starting Parita in this chaos.
No kidding,
Most of it has been, business relationship building. It's all on Zoom. I really miss that, people, meeting them face to face. And then helping small businesses at this time. What am I hearing? A lot of them, they need capital. They need to survive. They need grants, right? So it's advocating and supporting those small businesses and making sure, we just connect the dots at the provincial level and then at the federal level as well. But again, the province has been helping quite a bit, and it's very nice to see, that support is there. So yeah, it's been difficult, but what can you do?
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you so much. And I mean, that's the context that we're living in, right? Is that here we are having this, online in this way, which, happened to some degree before we went into kind of the pandemic time, but it sure has literally zoomed us up and created all kinds of applications in that for us to connect with. Jason, over to you as kind of the last round in terms of top of mind, for the Saskatoon Chamber, Greater Saskatoon Chamber of Commerce. What's top of mind right now for your organization? What's on the ground right now?
Well, boy, what hasn't been said here by this? I would agree with everything that's been said. All of us have an opportunity to connect directly with business owners and people who are in leadership positions who who are ultimately responsible for everything that's happening in those businesses. The safety needs of their employees, the safety needs of their customers. They're assessing all of the business and financial risks that COVID is threatening for them. They're making changes to maintain their operations. And then on top of it, if you're a business owner or a working person who's also a mom or dad, all of this is simultaneous with making changes at home to keep schoolwork and other commitments rolling. So, we really, it's a privilege for us to work directly with these businesses because we see it up close, but we really do see the very personal and human toll that COVID has taken on these businesses. It's always little, it's a bit of a misnomer to talk about the business community or businesses because, of course, behind any one of those are human beings. These are real people. These are people like you and me who are just trying to get by, and they are very tired. They are exhausted. They're hanging on, but they're very tired. So to your question about what's top of mind, we're talking a lot more about mental health and wellness at our chamber than we ever have before. In a way that the ag industry has for a decade, by the way, with helplines and special supports for producers. We're talking out loud about, okay, what do we need to think about in terms of providing our members with supports so that they can continue to be healthy and function, for example. So we're gonna have to show up differently. We're gonna have to think differently about how we provide support to these members, and it's not just about rubber chicken dinners and networking opportunities and all those things you normally associate with what a business group does. We're going to have to really take stock of the service and support we provide to members and show up differently to make sure that they have what they need.
Yeah, thank you, Jason. There's so much that just comes to mind. And, I think we do. I was teasing before we got on air, that we're here till midnight, but I think we could be here till midnight unpacking this, and drawing people into the conversation because we're all learning and we're learning in every minute. That's for sure. Anika, thanks to everybody for that first round, our warm up round. And now to Anika to get into some of the deeper questions that we've got for you.
Perfect. Thank you, Lenore. Okay, so beginning with Monica, here's our next question. From your perspective and experience, what are a couple of key things you would like the listeners to understand about efforts you have been involved with during this pandemic?
So it's interesting, when we think about, we all still have work to do, and at the chamber, we still have a strategic plan to follow, and we still have goals to meet. And I think what happened was COVID kind of rose to the top of the strategic plan, but we didn't let the strategic plan go. So we continued to work on the goals in the strategic plan, and we really focused on continuing our online training, our Indigenous awareness training. We created an Indigenous supplier directory. And we worked with key local chambers, bringing them programs to help them stay connected with their members and serve in new ways. And I think that's really important because the focus on Shop Local, certainly supported by the Chamber and all the chambers in Saskatchewan, has been critical during COVID, but it's also going to be critical moving forward, that we understand we have multiple talents and multiple resources and great ideas here in Saskatchewan, and we need to keep that message going. And the chambers will certainly work on that. And we certainly didn't stop advocating to the province or the federal government to make sure there was sufficient and aligned supports. We also held workshops and sessions to show people what programs were out there and to make sure that they were applying for them, because even though they were, programs are tried to be made to be simple to apply for, they're not easy to apply for or to remember what all you might be able to apply to. From our my company perspective, we used the opportunity to create some new programs. So we created a program to help existing companies find their new level of capacity to be able to survive through COVID. We tested our new program on 2 cohorts, and there was 19 people, and all of them were able to come up with new tools to stay in business, and some of them actually to grow. So we know it's within the capacity of entrepreneurs to do this, but they need to come together. And what they told us is it was the collaboration with each other that helped them find new ways to keep their company going and keep it being sustainable. I think they really realized that, you know, entrepreneurship is not a solo journey. It is definitely something that you pursue in collaboration with a support community around you.
Thank you so much, Monica. And I agree with your points. Like, shop local was always a thing, but the awareness that was raised throughout COVID was on a different level. And we did have plans of doing things, and COVID didn't essentially stop them, but it did stop change the way that we did. So thanks for that answer. And over to you, Ashley.
Did you guys see that? It was an Easter bunny cookie.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah. Sent the kid upstairs, you know, mom's live. She had to make her appearance, I guess. So again, yeah, it's been very interesting this year. We did have a strategic plan in place, and of course, with COVID, you know, a lot of that just couldn't happen, and so we had to be creative. You know, lead developments and partnerships, creating our vision and goals, and enhance our visibility. So that just became more of an online presence. Again, starting up the organization from scratch. So we had to create a website. We just have to build momentum, right? So that's been quite fun. What more can I say about that? Investment attraction, that's been one that's actually been very busy. And so just finding the need for an investment strategy just within the region, you know, how we're going to approach these bigger companies wanting to come to Prince Albert and do business. And at the same time, trying to manage everything else. So yeah, it's response, recovery, and resilience. Those have been my go-to words for this whole year. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Ashley. And now over to you, Jason.
Well, you know, I'd echo much of what Monica said. You know, we've been really involved in conversations with, you know, provincial and local decision makers on COVID response policies. You know, part of that conversation for us has always been just trying to remind decision makers not to lose sight of the economic determinants of health, you know, beyond safeguarding physical health and wellness and all of the important interventions needed there. You know, income stability, financial security, employment, these are all key factors in physical and mental health as well. And so we've done our best to try and bring that perspective to the table and that conversation. We've been involved in a lot of sector-specific advocacy. You know, my colleague Jim on the panel here and I have tackled a few things. And then, you know, there's that sort of case management piece. I tell a story, and it's a kind of a sad one. I think that, you know, just before Christmas, I had over 60 active files on my desk of members who were running into challenges of varying levels with, say, COVID relief sort of programs, backstops, can't navigate CRA. You know, business people are they're not really good at applying for grants. That's kind of not their shtick. And then suddenly they're thrust into trying to navigate these relatively complex programs and get the relief as quick as they can to save jobs and keep the lights on. So a lot of active case management was also sort of part and parcel of all of it. But, you know, for us, and I would say, you know, Monica, Jim, all of the people on the panel, it's so great that these organizations kept their lights on in spite of all this. I think that I think it sends an important message to the business community in particular that when their organizations are active and doing their part still, in spite of it all, it gives some reason for optimism, and we've heard that loud and clear over the last few months too.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Jason. And I loved your point where you said that financial security is a big part of that mental health. And thanks for all your efforts and focusing on this key issue. And now over to you, Judith.
Well, what I found over this past year, it has been, we've really been able to strengthen our relationship with our members. I think our membership always knew we were there. Weren't quite sure what we did all the time, but throughout this pandemic, we've been in constant communication. And, when we were able to, we would go out and visit them. And that's when we would, having taken stock of all the opportunities out there for grant funding or financial supports, we could go in and say, hey, did you know you could apply for, up to $5,000 for this? Or can you access Q's or CECRA, whatever program was out there at that point in time? And we would be there to provide support in terms of them getting those financial pieces in place. So just like everyone else, we were that connector. But I think one of the biggest takeaways from this has been, I guess, the prominence and I guess the visibility, because it's always been there, of folks that are having mental health issues, experiencing homelessness. As a downtown, that is typically where we see folks congregate during the day. And when you don't have the office workers or folks coming down to a restaurant, who is left? Especially when the shelters are closed. So we had a lot of folks that were in various states of distress in our downtown, and it was really impacting the environment. Not just oh, someone doesn't want to come onto my patio now because there's someone there. It's what I found from the businesses was that they were concerned for that person who was struggling, who was getting drunk in the park because there was nowhere else to go, and that was the only respite that they had for themselves. So that accelerated our program. We're going to be launching a program in a couple of weeks called our Community Support Program, modeled very closely on what Saskatoon has with their Community Support Program, which provides that link between the service providers and the folks that need that support without having to bring in security or police forces. Because the Regina Police Services does not need to be called out for a gentleman who is screaming at the sky because he's high. That person needs to be directed to appropriate support services, whether it's shelter, or maybe he just needs a glass of water. And that's what our program, again, just like Saskatoon, is aiming to do. And in all honesty, as soon as it gets up, it will be none too soon, because those people out there, that population is growing, and it's just getting worse. And it's quite sad, because when they have no place to go and no support, or no link to support, no support system, it's just a real dire situation right now. And we're hoping whatever role we can play, we'll be there for those folks and get them the help that they need.
Thank you so much, Judith, for those comments. And again, great initiative and thinking about those people and taking steps to help them, for sure. Before I go to Jim, I would like to read a comment from one of our listeners. So Naushad Ali on Facebook said, "From the very start, we have been talking about reality revision and reimagined future. And this seems to refocus the conversation and bring about creative and innovative solutions and re-energizing results." Thank you so much, Naushad Ali. And yeah, over to you, Jim.
Okay, I'm going to admit full transparency. I forgot what the question was. I've been listening to all of the speakers, and I'm so excited about what they're saying. Maybe you could ask me the question again, because I need to focus.
For sure. So the question is, from your perspective and experience, what are a couple of key things you would like the listeners to understand about efforts you have been involved during this pandemic?
Right. And so right from the very onset, when, really the entire economy was shut down. We were the hospitality industry was the first hit, the hardest hit, and it's going to take the longest to recover. And so we're obviously worried about liquidity. When there's no revenues coming in, how is it that you can pivot? If you're a restaurant, maybe there's takeout. If you're a hotel, it's just extremely difficult. Tourism operations like in attractions can be pretty tough if nobody's moving around. So we started to see the world almost in two P&L sheets, profit and loss. And so immediately we saw that on the one hand, it's easy on the financial side to see where your profits are and your losses are. And the losses were really staggering. And what quickly evolved, though, were conversations around the other P&L sheet, which is around the human condition. And, there's been so many comments already made tonight about this. And we recognized right away, when the first shutdown happened, that we had tens of thousands of people from the hospitality industry laid off, and they're at home. And one of the things I think we can all agree on is that when you characterize or try to identify who really makes up our industry, typically, particularly on the restaurant side, when we're younger, we're in it for a reason. We're very social creatures. We like to get out and about. We love the customers. We love the people that we work with. We like to party. And so when you take that entire demographic and now they're at home, right away, March 17th, we're having the conversations around we need to pay attention to the mental health and wellness of these folks that have now gone from very social situations into isolation. And now there's issues of job security. There's all of those other things that can really start to take their toll. And keep in mind, too, that as a young bartender and server, one of the things we used to like to do is socialize. So and oftentimes that would mean that we would go out and party. Part of that challenge is now that you're home, now you're isolated, you're starting to feel a little bit depressed. Some people will start to participate in those same activities but alone. That can be a real dangerous mix when it comes to mental health and wellness. And as the months dragged on, so there's that demographic that we were worried about. And then there was also now the ownership group from the smaller and medium-sized markets in which their business had absolutely evaporated. And these were folks that were typically between 55 and 65, and their life's work was now gone and is gone. And, we would get these very distressing calls from folks from around the province in which now they couldn't get insurance. Their mortgage was being called. There was no revenues. One woman, 65 years old, she said, "Jim, I live above my bar. I have no family. I'm in poor health. She said, I won't live in my car. This is the end of the road for me." And thankfully, we've got some great support systems in place. RCMP, we've got wellness checks that we can do. These are the types of calls that we started to get. And we knew that we had to answer that bell, and to Jason's point, that when there's that clarion sort of, sound that comes across our deck, we better make sure that we're trying to do the right things. So that's when we started to engage in a really robust, new initiative around mental health and wellness for hospitality. And so we've engaged a number of different partners. And recently, the Insurance Brokers Association of Saskatchewan they have a program called Brokers Care. And they're now supporting us, and we've engaged Alan Kaler. And today, Jason, you'd be happy to know that we launched our very first in a series of webinars that's specific to hospitality and mental health and wellness. And for exactly these reasons, is that as the P&L sheet on the financial side becomes more and more dire, is that people's psyches really need some support. They need resources. And more than anything, they need a safe place where they can go and they can feel like they can talk. Alan's talk today was extremely uplifting, but it was also extremely, that red flags went up everywhere. For what he talked about, I know of about half a dozen individuals out there that I've worked with, and I know we all have, in which now it's like, I need to do more outreach. I need to make sure that I'm having conversations, because people typically, and men are the worst. I probably shouldn't frame it like that, but I mean, out of every 4 suicides, 3 are men. Men have incredible difficulty expressing their feelings. They don't reach out. And as was said in one book, is women seek help, men die. So, I mean, there's a lot of this out there right now that we have to be cognizant of. We have to make sure that we're doing all the right things and we're taking care of each other. So again, back to that point, those would be the two priorities, would be liquidity and then the mental health and wellness. And they're both so intertwined, is that we can't take our eye off of ours. 2 podcasts coming up and then consultation. And so for anybody, and we invite, it's not just our industry, for anybody, these are come one, come all, jump onto these webinars because there's such valuable information there. And I guarantee that anybody who takes those or watches them will be affected. And it opens up your mind now to different types of things that maybe you should look for. So again, those would be the 2 priorities, is the P&L sheets, financial, and then the human capital.
Thank you so much, Jim. And yeah, thank you so much for all those insights. And before I pass it over to Rashid, I have to say, every point that you guys brought up, all the issues that you guys are working on and everything, all your efforts, it's incredible. It amazes me. These are things that even maybe I didn't even think about, that, okay, COVID is affecting them in so many different ways. So I am really happy, and thank you everyone for everything you guys are doing. And over to you, Rashid.
Thank you, Anika. And now the fun part is starting, because that's the important part where audience can be, asking questions. So now here's the part where we invite you, the audience, to direct a question to any or all of our panel members, and we will do our best to get as many questions and answers started as possible. We will now field some questions from audience members, approximately 30 to 40 minutes, which translate to 3 to 5 questions with 60 to 90-second responses from each of you. We will then offer panel members a minute or 2 for some closing remarks. So we got a question from the audience, and I will start with Ashley. The question is, how businesses deliver better outcomes in times of COVID-19 crisis?
How businesses deliver better outcomes?
Rashid, do you want to repeat the question?
Yeah. So the question just came is like, how businesses deliver better outcomes in times of COVID-19 crisis?
Oh,
That's a hard one.
that is a tough one. Businesses are just trying to navigate through all of this as well, right? And so how are they going to gain profitability during these times? They have to definitely be unique. Everything pretty much shifted to online basis, so it's quick learning, and not everybody is online, and so that's one of the target markets that how are we going to reach those people? So that's my best response.
Thank you, Ashley. And now to Jason.
Well, look at a couple things. The business community is not homogenous, right? Every business has a different model, has different customers, has a different operating framework. So there's not a one size fits all. I would say businesses generally have adapted in sort of 3 ways. One would be in terms of their physical space, of course, to respect the restrictions around distancing and other things. I would say in terms of technology, Saskatchewan, this is a statistic, I guess, that was reported even within the last couple of weeks. The number of businesses in Saskatchewan that have springboarded into online sales or online service delivery, if you're a consultant, is the highest in the country. Saskatchewan's uptake on this has been the highest in the country. So that has been yet another way of sort of adapting to the COVID reality. And then, of course, the workplace policies around working from home in cases where that is doable and possible. So, there's a lot of different ways to adapt. Everything really turns on the type of business and whether they can turn on a dime like that in terms of physical space, technology, or policies.
Thank you, Jason. And now to Judith.
Yeah, I guess I have members that have told me 2020 was their most profitable year in all the years in operation. It really depends on what you're selling and your customer base. But then I've had others that, are, like Jim said, hanging on by a thread. What What we did see with a lot of the businesses that did not offer takeout pre-COVID now have an online ordering system, have either hooked up with Skip the Dishes, Uber Eats, or are doing their own thing. A lot of the restaurants that were typically fine dining have adapted to a takeout model or a delivery model. So, you know, they've been forced to embrace technology, and you know, this is kind of the way that we're going. So that's something that we're encouraging, and we're trying to support them with. And yeah, I guess just being resilient and not putting messaging out there that makes people more scared. We need to inspire consumer confidence, because, you know, right now we're in lockdown here in Regina, and, you know, Premier Mo can lift it tomorrow. That does not guarantee that all these restaurants will be full the day after, because the consumer confidence needs to be high enough for people to assess the risk and say, you know what, I'm feeling safe. I'm going to go out there and enjoy my meal with my family in a restaurant. So until that happens, I think restaurants, especially restaurants, food and beverage, need to be very upfront about, you know, how often they clean, how they're observing all of those social distancing and safety protocols. And I've found that the businesses that have been very vocal about how they're trying to keep the public safe, those are the ones that tend to have, I guess, a more loyal clientele, if you will.
Thank you. And now to Jim.
Yeah, I would agree with everything that Judith just said. I think that when it comes to consumer confidence, that's the key in going forward. And I've said publicly many times, you know, that irrespective of what the orders of a government may be, we really need to take personal ownership and accountability for our own actions. Depending on what your mindset is you'll find a way if you want to get out and about. I would suggest that, you know, in many cases, other than a few outliers, that the environments that are restaurants and particularly our hotels have never been ordered closed. They were one of the first at the forefront of sterilization procedures and whatnot. And there's very little evidence to suggest that actually transmissions occur in these environments. Certainly there's been some outliers, but for the most part, as a percentage, these are extremely safe environments to go into. In fact, probably safer than going home. I mean, if you imagine, you know, a place of business where you've got a lot of young people and they're going to go out and they can only go till 10 o'clock. Well, let's call it as it is. They're buying a 24 pack and a bottle of tequila and they're doing body shots at home. This is where the transmission occurs. If you're in a restaurant or if you're in a tavern or a pub where there's good protocols in place, guess what? You're even monitored right down to how close you are to somebody else. They monitor your drinking. You're not allowed to overdrink. We've got like Sears program, which is responsible service of alcohol. Quite frankly, those are the environments that you want to go into if you want to have a great social experience and even be around other people. And for those that are out there that have been able to pivot, and let's just again keep in mind who can pivot and who can't. You know, restaurants can and did pivot to that delivery model, you know, to the takeout piece. If they weren't in it, they got into it. And if they were already in it, they got a lot better at it. When you take a hotel, you can't drive demand like that. There is no pivot to have somebody come across a border and stay in your hotels. So this is where we're now starting to see that there's starting to be separation, right? There's separation between the ones that can and are able to. And now for those that can't, how is it that we're going to support them as they adapt for the longer haul? So, for example, if hotels, meeting room space, you know, if you've got 40,000 square foot of conference space, and yet we know now that these types of meetings, Zoom meetings, will probably play down. Certainly a lot will come back, but there's a lot of companies now that have discovered, wow, you know what, this might actually be something that we'll continue to do more of. So if you've got 40,000 square feet of banquet or meeting space, what are you going to do with all 40,000 square feet? You might not need all that. So that idea of reinvention and reimagining all of those different things that are that your business has been predicated on before, those rules may not apply going forward.
Thank you, Jim. And lastly, to Monica.
So I think there's a few things that can be done to get better outcomes. I think right now is an excellent time, and over the last year has been an excellent time to really reconnect with customers and get to know them better, and engage with them. The chamber, I know, has sent out a number of different surveys to its members to gauge, where is the important area that we should be focusing on. I know the Saskatoon Chamber does that. So it's a time to reconnect with customers and really learn what their new needs are and what they are going to be coming forward. I also think it's a really excellent time for, and again, I'm going to talk about the smaller companies, but it's time to scale up. So take courses, get yourself scaled up to the next level of knowledge, learn what it means to become more digitized in your company. Take the time to do it. There's never been a better time to learn online than there is today, and there's such a wide variety of places to learn from. And then the other thing I think is to really reach out and connect with a wider group so that you've got a support network. The network that you would usually see if you went and had a coffee or went to a chamber luncheon or went to whatever. You want to have that group available to you on a regular basis because, this time more than any, we can get our ideas and our feedback and new connections because of Zoom. And I agree, Jim. I think that there will be more people using Zoom, but I think we're also meeting more than we did before. So we are more, we might have had a phone call or we might have said, well, I should meet with so-and-so, but it didn't get in the calendar and then you forgot. Well, now you're making these meetings happen. So I think the smaller groups will probably continue to happen more in a virtual format, but we're also ready for those big in-person conversations again, and the ability to shake a hand or sit beside somebody and have a conversation and a glass of wine. We're ready for that. So I think that both of these things are going to happen. But for those better outcomes, we need to get really connected to our customers. In our company, what we had done to come up with that program is we basically reached out to a bunch of our alumni and we said, we need you to co-create with us. Like, come together, tell us what you need, tell us where your pain points are, how can we help you get through this time? And they told us, and then we created something to support them during that time, and they told us when we had to change it or when we had to adapt it or when a new pain point came up. So these are going to be new relationships with customers that we probably haven't had in the past, but they're critical today, and this is a great time to explore those.
Thank you for the responses. And now I will pass it down to Madhurja for the second question.
Thanks everyone again for joining us today. I have a different take, and this question I got from one of my friends. The question is, because of COVID, as you know, we are getting less number of new immigrants and less number of students in our universities, UFS and UFR, and coming to Saskatoon, Regina, or Saskatchewan in general. And how is that affecting our businesses, our local businesses? I'll start with Monica.
Thank you. I'm a huge advocate of diversity in the business community because I think it enriches us all. And so we still have a number of new Canadians starting businesses in Saskatchewan, or they started before the pandemic hit, or they were in the midst of coming over when they wanted to come and start a business in a community. And I think this is where the local community has really risen to the challenge to welcome them and to help them merge into our economy and to support their new ideas and their new ventures. And we certainly will be looking forward to having international students come back. But in the meantime, the educational institutions have certainly ramped up their ability for people to be able to start the process and participate in online virtual sessions. And I think they're working harder to make that better and to make it more seamless. Once the borders do open and people can land here, there will be a welcoming community for them, and that's really critical. It's again coming back to the customers. How do we lay out the welcome mat, whether they're coming from another country or there are customers that are in another town? How do we make it so welcome, so that once all the restrictions are lifted, we've got customers coming in the door, and we're not going to have to start from scratch. So yeah, that would be my response.
Thanks, Monica. Jason.
Well, look at newcomers are so vital to a thriving and growing workforce in this city in particular. It's almost tough to overstate. And one of the real concerns and one of the real unknowns is, what does a year or possibly more of fewer international students, for example, graduating from post-secondary institutions, either Sask Polytech or any of the universities or even the regional colleges, what does that look like in terms of labor supply and workforce for businesses that are going to try and build out of COVID and try and recover? What does it mean when there are fewer already skilled and professional newcomers that are not here and haven't had the benefit of a year to settle and become integrated into the community and find employment? If you're an employer, large or small, and you rely heavily on either international student graduates or newcomers to do what you do, this is huge. And so it's one of the great unknowns. It's a great question, and it's top of mind, I can tell you, for a lot of our members who are now thinking about what the next 12, 24 months looks like.
Thanks, Jason. Now to Ashley, but before I let you go, I forgot to mention about SIAS, I guess, Saskatchewan Polytechnic.
Saskatchewan Polytechnic, right? Yeah.
Yeah, definitely less immigrants. It does affect local businesses and the whole business model, right? So I think it's a perfect time, though, to strategize as to how can we appeal more to immigrants as well. I think it's a perfect time, to, and this is what we're moving towards with Parita, with our strategic plan, is how are we going to promote it as a place to live? And so I think, with this downtime, it seems, a little bit of downtime here with everything happening. There's just a lot more work that can be done foundationally. And so that was one of the big priorities for us is, how are we going to promote the region as a place to live? And so videos, that's one thing that we're working on. There's a number of ideas, right? So yeah, that's my response.
And now to Judith.
Echoing what everyone else said, I guess what Ashley said is so true. We need to start really looking at marketing our communities as good places to live. The work from home, the remote working really opens up the world for everyone, really. You're not necessarily tied to one city anymore, because a lot of these large businesses are offering the chance to work remotely. So what do we have in our favor here? Right now, we have very low housing costs relative to the rest of Canada. How can we market that opportunity for home ownership to the rest of Canada and to the rest of the world? In particular, here in downtown, we're seeing a lot of for lease signs in our storefront. So how can we tie those two or knit those two initiatives together to get more foreign investment to start up businesses in these vacant storefronts and to invest in a home in our community? I think that's a project that will be on my horizon with our economic development Regina here. How do we market our community as a whole to not just immigrants and newcomers, but to everyone?
And now, last but not the least, Jim.
This is such an important topic. It's been identified as one of the looming crises. As we get closer to the horizon line, of emerging from this. A new horizon line emerges. Of course, you get closer to it. And our labor market is going to be in extreme crisis for a number of reasons. And this was identified a month into the pandemic by Tourism HR Canada, and for a number of reasons. So when we talked earlier about consumer confidence for people wanting to go out and go to a restaurant, it's going to take time. One of the biggest challenges is that first we need to understand that 7 out of 10 kids, youth, get their very first job in hospitality. 8 out of 10 Indigenous First Nations kids get their very first job in our industry. We now have a lack of confidence amongst those consumers that would come and buy into our industry because of the massive layoffs. Many, and we've seen that in enrollment rates across Canada, and this is actually a global phenomenon, is that pipeline, that available labor pool that used to be there for us. And keep in mind, in Saskatchewan, our available labor pool, forget about the unemployment numbers, was extremely low. We had great difficulty. If we all remember those kind of boom years, it was really, really hard to get people to come and work for us. We had an excellent program for a number of federal and provincial streams to have people from other countries come to Saskatchewan on a temporary basis, and then there was a pathway to permanent residency and then citizenship. This was remarkable. We need to reinvigorate that if we are going to survive. Part of my biggest worry is what keeps me up at night is that we catapult our way out of this. Saskatchewan is doing we're positioning ourselves very well for travelers to come, and our travelers will come and we'll have nobody to be ambassadors for us. And now, again, fear of sounding like Chicken Little, all of the numbers are being reflected in this as we speak, right? So you're getting every single province has put a lot of money towards retraining. So you've got tens of thousands of people in Saskatchewan that were out of work that are now retrained for other industries, right? So when we start to ramp back up, all of those people that were laid off, whether temporarily or permanently, won't be available to come back to those positions, right? Which we may get a bit of a lag time, so we might be able to prepare. Now we also need to keep in mind that from across the planet, you can make applications to have somebody come from another country to Saskatchewan as a temporary or even from citizenship. That's only one part of the application. The other part of the application is the country of origin being willing to say, yes, you can go, right? They're the ones too that can turn off that tap and say, you know what, we need all hands on deck in our own country. So the labor challenges that are coming will probably be our single biggest pinch point going forward into 2022. As the world ramps back up, and particularly for our frontline service positions, we're going to be in extreme need. So those are the types of conversations that we're already engaged with at a federal level with regards to the different streams. There's about 7 of them that would allow people to come from other countries and into Saskatchewan, into Canada, and then into Saskatchewan. We've been engaged with Minister Harrison. So thankfully, Minister Harrison is the Minister of Trade and Export Development, which is huge to tourism. He's the Minister of Immigration, and he's the Minister of Career Training. So he holds the keys to so many of the different pinch points that we have. And again, we're lucky that he's a huge, and he's also the Minister of Tourism. Who knew? So, I mean, we've got now somebody in a position in which we can start to work, but there's another 4 plates in the air that we cannot let one of those drop, or we won't be prepared for our recovery. We really need the people that are in our industry and work here are the foundation from which we will build on. If we don't have that, we're just building a house on sand. Sand is fluid, it'll move around, and we're ready for collapse. So unless we get this piece right around the labor piece, we are going to have some significant troubles going forward. And again, I don't want to sound like Chicken Little, but part of what our jobs are, I think, is to try to identify, look at the crystal ball, try and read some tea leaves, see what the heck is going on, and then try to see what it is that might be coming towards us so that we can start to have conversations now as opposed to reacting to it when it hits us. But this labor piece, I strongly suggest for all of the listeners and for the people on this call is let's start to engage in those conversations, whether it's immigration or whether it's how is that we can train up locally, and certainly for communities around Saskatchewan, how is it we can mobilize these different workforces. So that for me is going to be the next big challenge for us that we need to start talking about now.
Thanks, Jim. I really liked the passion all of you are showing for the questions and how you deeply thought about this issue. Now back to Lenore.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm really enjoying this conversation. Thanks for taking time out on an evening before we head into a long weekend. We can tell that by the slowness of some of the audience members, although we are getting questions through our direct feeds, just so you know. So I'm getting quite a bit of traffic on my own channels here. So I want to share one with you. And so this is a kind of open mic. So anyone who wants to jump in and answer this, I've got a couple of questions before we kind of go into a closing round. So maybe, Jason, I'll start with you just on an open mic here. What supports do you think businesses are going to need post-pandemic from government and otherwise? I mean, there was a lot of supports that came out right at the beginning, and I know what Jim was just saying here in terms of the labor, which I really appreciate you flagging that, because how many people are actually thinking about that potentially, right? It's such a crucial one. Jason, what are the supports we're going to be needing to think about?
Yeah, what a great question that is. And we're coming up on provincial and federal budget time, so we've been contemplating that as well. I would say, look at the rent subsidy programs and the wage subsidy programs have been described as lifelines to many businesses, many of our members. I think if there's any opportunity to extend those into the third and fourth quarter of 21, that would be great. One of the areas that we're really looking at, though, Lenore, is this awful gap in the supports that provide no support to any business that's under 2 years old. So if you had just started a business, just pre-pandemic, you were showing income, but maybe not profitability. But I mean, you were on a path. You would not have met any of the eligibility, requirements or thresholds to actually qualify for any of these supports. And I can speak specifically. There's a great pizza place in my neighborhood that opened 2 months before the pandemic in March. They were profitable and generating good income in January and February. From March until December this past year, they never made a dime. And all of their expenses, fixed and variable, were put on credit, which means they're now closed. They closed their door in February. So the sad reality is there's a terrible gap here that unanticipated, unintended, in the flurry of designing programs in the minute. But these smaller business, and Monica will probably should be able to speak to this better than anybody else. Any business under 2 years old has been absolutely hamstrung, and we've got to find a way. We've got to find a way to give these ones oxygen before they completely peter out.
Yeah, thank you for that, Jason. Who'd like to weigh in next on this, just in terms of the kinds of supports we're still going to need to, have governments think about in terms of helping out in a post-pandemic environment? Monica, jump in here.
Yeah. So just to continue to build on what Jason was talking about, I think that extending some programs is really important. One of the programs, it was wonderful to have extended, and now as of yesterday, it was closed. And I would love to have a reconsideration. Is the Reopen Saskatchewan training subsidy, because it was a lot of people took advantage of it. We talk about skilling up and skilling out. And most important to that is in the small business sector is the entrepreneur skilling up and skilling out. And unfortunately, currently with the job grant, for example, that isn't open to an owner of a company, of a small company. And we know that if the owner is able to skill up and skill out, they'll bring the rest of the people that they work with along with them. And the second piece that I think really needs to be acknowledged, and certainly something at the Saskatchewan Chamber that we've been discussing and trying to amplify and advocate for, is support to help companies digitize. So there's been lots of kind of, falling into by default trying to sell something online, but digitization affects the whole business. It's not just about selling, and getting to that stage and helping the entrepreneurs and the people that work with them learn how to take their companies to the next level. I think there's a huge opportunity here, and some support for that I think would be an excellent investment of time and money.
Yeah, thank you, Monica. Who else would like to jump in on this? And Judith, go for it.
Well, to continue what Monica was saying, the province of Ontario has a program called Digital Main Street, which does exactly that. Helps small business owners digitize, move their product online, help them market in using technology. And at the beginning of the pandemic, we reached out to them to see if they could bring that program here to Saskatchewan. We were hopeful because we saw that same program, Digital Main Street, go out to British Columbia. I believe Alberta took it on. I think Nova Scotia, there was an Atlantic province that also adopted it. And we were very hopeful that the province here would. We put that proposal in. It's still kind of hovering there. It hasn't been a decision, but getting some traction on that type of program that can really help small business owners here in Saskatchewan, I think is so important, especially when we have these smaller communities that typically relied on, the drop in traffic that they never needed online because they knew everyone in town, and now they can't open. So how do you keep them generating income? How do we teach them that resiliency by having that digital, I guess more of a digital presence? Another thing that we're working on, and Lenore knows this, I've done a lot of work in terms of advocacy with the federal government on behalf of downtowns. And recently a report just came out that looked at the 6 largest downtowns across Canada. And it did comment on the impact of tourism and the loss of tourism in our downtowns, and the fact that, what I alluded to earlier about the lack of office workers. And this report is recommending that the federal government put in a budgetary line item specifically to support downtown resilience, downtown reinvestment. And, I'm hoping that this report gets some traction. Obviously, it's something that I'm going to be advocating for in terms of our downtown. And I guess lastly, in terms of support, after a federal election, what infrastructure package is going to be announced? Are we ready with shovel-ready projects for us to take advantage of those additional funding opportunities that can get some of our projects municipally off the ground, get some construction workers employed, get some improvements into our environment, that when we come out of this is, an environment that's much more attractive for future investment.
Yeah, thank you, Judith. We're going to be sure to send a link to this to the different orders of government, I tell you, if they need to hear this, right? I mean, and I do have a follow-up question to this, and I'll have Rashid at some point jump in. Ashley, please weigh in on this in terms of supports we're going to need to be thinking about as we go post-pandemic here.
Yeah, I definitely like to continue to see that support for the businesses, also for the employees and the self-employed. One of the things that wasn't touched upon, though, was infrastructure. And, there's so many people that are jumping online, but not everybody is at that level yet. I just find, that's one of the going concerns is not everybody has that connectivity. And it's an issue, for providing school at home for parents. It's frustrating, especially in the rural communities. So that investment in infrastructure it's high, and that need is going to be so much greater, right? And I don't think we're going to step away from this online way of life. So that's a huge one that I wanted to mention.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ashley. And Jim, I'm sure you've got something to weigh in on this.
Oh boy. That's why I'm losing all my hair. You can see my bald spot from the space shuttle now. Yeah, it's so federally, what are the supports that are in place now that we need extended? Hotels Association of Canada and TIAC, the Tourism Industry Association of Canada, have really led the way with regards to extensions of the wage subsidies and the rent subsidies, and those have been key. They need to be in place for this year at the very least, if we're going to make it. So Those are really important. That's an important piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
Provincially, of course, our government has come to the table with a number of different support programs, and we are actively engaged in having those extended. And quite honestly, I mean, I'll be honest, we'll phone them and say, it would be great if you could do that. And they're like, yeah, Jim, we're already done that. So they understand the crisis that we're in. And they do know that these supports are the very things that will allow us to go forward. But a lot of people don't understand sort of the nuances of a number of things that have gone on by way of support. Minister Mikowski, when he had the file, they came up with a program in which it was they increased the commissions on VLTs. Now, for everybody that's listening to this, or else as a panel member, may think, well, what does that mean? Well, really what it means is that if you have a VLT machine and the rest of your restaurant has been shut down, the only income other than your takeout would be your VLTs. So they increased the VLTs from 15 to 25%. Honestly, there has been dozens of operators that have phoned and said that without that 10% increase in the VLT commission, I would have closed my doors. So it's those kinds of things that the government is listening to right now, which has made the difference between permanent closure and maybe even temporary, or at least keeping your doors open. The cap on third-party delivery, that. I have members that phoned and said, we don't want that. They said, this is government stepping in the way of free enterprise and competition. We get that. But the overwhelming majority of the operators said, we need that breathing space. We need that just for now. One operator said in 3 months, if it had been 18% as opposed to the 30%, he would have been able to keep $20,000 in his jeans, and it would have allowed him to reinvest that back into some of his online stuff that he was trying to do. So it's those little pieces out there right now that we're talking to government about, that if they do this, and what about WCB premiums and all these other little facets to an expense sheet, to that expense lines on a budget, that different levels of government can participate in and help us out with. So it's all about those conversations. So really, when it comes to the support piece, there's probably a dozen different ways in which federal, provincial, and municipal governments can help us out. And one of the most disappointing pieces to this has been municipal responses to those larger assets that are in our downtown areas. And Judith and Jason can certainly attest to this. If we see, projections are right now, that by the beginning of next year, is that we could lose 70% of those larger assets because of the massive amount of overhead costs that they have. Now, when we look at Saskatchewan, we don't think that could be that high. But when you, Judith, and Jason, can you imagine if you were to lose 3 of your downtown assets, which would be a lot less than 70%, or even 2, if they closed down and they could no longer get insurance and that they had to be bulldozed? When that type of business starts to vacate your downtown, and restaurants are forced to leave, what happens to that retail market, and what is it replaced by? And so those become very difficult conversations. And this is where mayors and councils really need to have engaging conversations with the downtown districts. And what do they want their downtowns to look like next year and the year after and the year after that? Because there's examples all across the world in which businesses have left their downtown cores because they couldn't afford it any longer, or the business wasn't there. And look what's happened. And I guess, I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus, but if anybody wants sort of a stark reality check, is just type in Victoria downtown. Victoria right now is going through some extreme troubles with some of the challenges that they have. And the Victoria that I knew and loved when I lived in BC for a short time is not the same Victoria that it is today. So again, this is where, from a municipal perspective, you need to engage, as Monica said, you need to engage with all of those business owners that are there. It's hard to do, but you need to make sure as a public official that you are engaged with the business community in downtown, or you could lose it. And if you lose it, like I said to one mayor, you can have anything you want in life as long as you're willing to pay the price. And if you are willing to make sure that you get every dollar of that property tax in your pocket this year, there could be a price to pay next year. Although many aren't in default now, $250,000 a month, there's not many. Keep in mind too that 80%, and you look across Canada, 80% of those branded hotels and restaurants are franchisees. So they are people in our communities that live in, their kids play on our soccer teams with our kids. They are going, their revenues are non-existent. Their fixed costs are still there. How long could any of us on this call, if we are all of a sudden out of money and in a deficit every month, be able to last before we declare bankruptcy and closed our doors? So this is where we have that conversation. It's been mentioned many times, but we need our governments to engage with us in a meaningful way to come up with solutions so it'll allow us to survive. Oh, sorry, I'm done. I talked too much.
Yeah, no, thank you. And Monica, I see your hand up, but I want to bring this as our wrap-up question, because guess what? We've been going for a while now, and it's awesome. And I told you we could stay here till midnight because there's lots that we can get into. I'm going to tag team this a little bit with Rashid here, because there is something that's out there. And Monica, maybe you can think about this as you build on what Jim just said. There's a stigma out there. I'm a small business owner too. I also belong to a lot of community initiatives, and so I wear those hats too. And I hope to be a good aunt and a good daughter and a good family member and a good friend. So we all play those roles. But there's a stigma out there with business guys. You know it, you see it, and we're actually getting it even in our feeds tonight. Okay, and it's this whole notion that there's business over here and they just want everything open up wide and everything, why aren't we opening it up? And there's this whole mythology out there. And I'm going to say it as a business owner who's sitting on a board alongside of Monica, the Saskatchewan Chamber right now, and that is not what is being discussed around the tables in the chamber. But I'd like each of you to address that, because the stigma is real. And Rashid, just to kind of give a little bit of what some of the comments are that we're getting.
Yeah, so we got a comment on our Twitter account, and it was like, let me guess, keep everything open, because besides being business owners, we are scientists and doctors.
So it's this whole notion that health is over there, business is over there, and somehow the pressures that are being put out there is all because the businesses just want to keep the doors wide open. Judith, if you don't mind, I'll go to Monica just because she had her hand up first, and then I'll go to you. Monica, weighing in on this, because to me, this kind of gets to the crux of this whole conversation as we're going to, and it's one that's frustrating for me personally and professionally. Monica.
Yeah, and I think people forget that businesses, as was said earlier, businesses are owned by people, and people want to stay healthy, and people want to make sure their businesses stay healthy. The support programs have certainly helped, but we're an educational institute, and we've been at home since last March, and so there's a huge variety of opinions, just as there are people in the business community as to whether we should be open or not. But I would say the vast majority of businesses say stay safe, follow the protocols, get vaccinated, and that will take us quicker to open than just ignoring all of those signals out there. So I don't think the business community is saying, "Oh, wide open, let's wide open." I don't hear that at all in the circles that I move in, or at the Saskatchewan Chamber level, and I'm not sure that anybody here on the panel is hearing the same thing either. So yeah.
Yeah, Judith, please, thanks for building on that. Judith.
You're absolutely right, Monica. I've heard, I guess, a wide variety of opinions, but what I've heard most from my membership anyways, is that they are open because the province at the time had not mandated them to close. So they were not able to access other supports because there was not a public health order in place. So by default, they almost had to stay open just to try to make a go of it. And if you're out there trying to market yourself and trying to capture whatever small amount of customer base there is out there, the last thing you're going to say is, I don't want to be open. So that's kind of where that mixed messaging happens, where they have to put that forward face out there to the public saying, yes, we are safe. Yes, you can come into my restaurant and eat here and you will be safe. But so many of them have said to me, I wish they would just mandate us to close. It will be safer for me. It will be safer for my staff. I'm going to be able to access CERB or the other supports that are out there. But without that mandate, they were almost forced to have to stay open and keep that brave face out there.
Yeah, thank you, Judith. Jason.
Yeah, this is one of the sad parts of this whole year is that I think it does polarize, communities and good people who have different views of what should be done. And let's be honest, this is, do we have to say it? It's unprecedented. There's no playbook for any of this. Look, I haven't heard one business organization, let's put it that way, say, open or nothing. Not once. In fact, what I tend to hear are businesses that are bending over backwards to ensure that their employees and their customers are safe. And frankly, if the province said, look, there is no other way here. There is no other way. No other intervention will help. We cannot do this in a targeted or strategic way. We have to shut it down. Then I guess we'd have to shut it down. That is what would have to happen here. But I would just suggest, and this is just based on the experience that we're seeing, I guess, in Southern Ontario and other jurisdictions. Toronto is on its 300th day of no in-dining in a restaurant. Not consecutive, but total. Today, 300 days of the last year, you haven't been able to sit in a restaurant. I think it will be interesting when this is all over to see whether or not the really significant, dramatic measures that Toronto and Peel have imposed on their businesses will actually prove ultimately to have been better or more effective than the approaches we've taken here. There is a tragic story here of people who have lost their lives to this virus, and it's maddening and sad to even contemplate and as of today, it's 436 in Saskatchewan. That's 436 too many. But what would be the outcome if we suddenly, not only in an effort to save sort of the health and wellness, the physical health and wellness of people, decided to shut the place down and watch people's livelihoods drain out at the same time? It would be another tragedy layered on to an already very tragic situation. So, I think I can say confidently for our group, all that we've ever really suggested is be careful, exercise caution. Let's be as strategic and surgical and precise and targeted as we can, because any measures that are more significant than that may have unintended and very dramatic consequences. And we have to consider what our cities and what our province looks like when this is all over. And it will be soon.
Yeah, thank you, Jason, for that. And I appreciate this. These are tough questions, right? There's emotions involved. There's the tangibles involved in that. Jim, before I go to you and Ashley as well, Jim, I had a question from somebody who's listening going, what did he mean by assets? What did he mean by assets? So just to clarify that, when we were talking about, if assets go missing in your downtown, for anybody that's been tuning in terms of that, can you just give a quick response to that?
Oh, sure. Assets, meaning, a hotel would be considered an asset, or a restaurant considered an asset, or a retail outlet considered an asset. So when those would start to migrate out of our downtown cores and maybe go to suburbs or to other areas, what would that mean? So
yeah, for sure. Now, to get to this other question, because it's one that tugs at all of us, right? This whole kind of polarity that kind of exists out there, kind of in the Ethernet and otherwise. What's your thoughts on that, Jim? Because I know that pressure's got to come running right into you.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, I have no idea how I ended up in this position with a lightning rod and a tinfoil hat. Like it's been quite remarkable. But one of the things that I would like to point out is that I don't think that the business community and the medical professionals are really that far off at all. I think from the very beginning, from the hotel perspective, our number one concern is that for the safety of our employees, right? And it should be. It's the same reason that if you're on a plane and the masks drop down, you put the mask on yourself first before anybody else, is you need to take care of ourselves before we can take care of other people. And so we've always been firmly entrenched in the idea that if we can take really, really good care of our employees, they will by extension take really, really good care of our customers, right? And so we need to follow the data on this. I only just learned the other day how to say epidemiology. I do not get into that lane. I started out as a pool boy. I'm a hotel and restaurateur. That's where I try to sit. So I try very hard to stay out of those political lanes. But Henshaw from Alberta, I think, summed it up very, very eloquently a couple of weeks ago, or maybe it was a month ago. And she said 0.8 of 1% of transmissions occur in the hospitality industry. They all occur in other areas. So if that is indeed the case, and I know that there's outliers, for the love of Pete, let's make sure that we've got strategies in place that go to the root cause. I used to be a safety person. Let's go to the root cause of the injury and not start to pay attention to all these different spokes. And, to Jason's point, there has been no measurable impact by closing down entire industries. In fact, there could be a good case to be made a year from now on the huge impacts to people's livelihoods, their mental health and wellness, and all of those other intrinsic damages that would happen. So, that's what I would encourage people to do, is actually look at the real facts, the real stark data in this, and start to make those good decisions. And we are in an environment in which everything is loaded by emotion. I think if there's one thing that I would like to leave with everybody, is that the business community and the health community aren't that far apart. We really want all the same things. Let's just keep people safe. Let's do the best job that we can in that. And I think that our government's unwillingness to close down this industry is a testament to how our industry has reacted to this in such a great way. We have so many great operators out there that are going above and beyond. They're losing money hand over fist just to make sure that their staff are safe and the customers are safe. I think we've responded remarkably well. And I think this is part of the reason why we're still open, and that we will be in better shape when we start to emerge from this than other provinces.
Yeah, thank you, Jim, for that. Ashley, last word to you on this whole notion.
What can I say that Jim hasn't said? Right? It's, I haven't heard that at all either, that we're far off. We're quite different, and that it should just be, businesses should stay open. It's been the challenge, for everyone just to get on board health-wise and just to keep exactly the employees safe and the customers. And so that has been a big priority for a lot of the businesses. And I can't add too much more. There was just so much that was said that is pretty relevant to that question.
Yeah, well, thank you guys for weighing in on all the questions, both that we kind of had from the folks beforehand and also through tonight as they've been listening in. Much appreciation, and just a testament to your efforts in navigating the way. So just thanks to each one of you. And Anika, to you to wrap up.
Perfect. Thank you, Lenore. And thank you, everyone, for joining today. Much appreciation, panel members, for taking the time to be here this evening. We have certainly learned a lot, and how important business is to our society, to our economy, to our lives in every aspect. And much appreciation to all the audience members for listening, for such great comments. I know we couldn't address all of them, but great comments, great feedbacks. And thanks to my colleagues, Lenore, Rashid, Madhurja, Jeff, but he couldn't join us today, and also Deborah and Ian, who's working behind the scenes. We shall continue to conduct more forums like this, and please like our Facebook page, The Voice of Saskatoon, and Civically Speaking and Know Saskatoon, where we will be conducting shows on various topics monthly. And in the meantime, wash your hands, wear a mask, stay apart so we can get together in person sooner than later, and get vaccinated when it's your turn. And happy spring.
Yeah. Take care, everybody. Thank you so much for coming on and spending a little extra time with us. Much appreciation.